Hello everybody, we're camping seminar. I'm not so good at the small talk, so I'm just going to start jumping right into things. I'm Becky Shade. I've been a full-time RVer for 5 years. I have work camped for most of those 5 years, and I've done several different jobs, and I'm going to talk about a few of them here with you guys today. So first, I'm going to cover Amazon's Camper Force. For those of you who aren't aware of what Camper Force is, Amazon.com hires a large number of RVers and itinerant people to work in their warehouses during the holiday season. So starting usually in September, going until December just before Christmas. You can work for Amazon without being in the Camper Force program, like just signing on as a temp, but working for Camper Force is kind of a benefit because they give you an RV site as part of the program, so it's good to get in with Camper Force. So working at Camper Force, there are a few different departments that you could be working in. All of them are pretty hard work. You will be on your feet for 10 hours a day. There is bending and lifting. They ask that you be able to lift up to 40 pounds, but you can have a person help you with that. I think it's 20 pounds unassisted, 40 pounds with assistance. And you could be working as a picker, as receiving, as a stower, and I'll go into a little bit more about what those different jobs entail, but all of them are warehouse work, and it does require a good amount of physical labor. So the jobs kind of divide up into inbound and outbound. Inbound jobs is receiving and stowing. And basically, like a receiving is product coming into the warehouse. Somebody has to unpack the boxes and scan them into the system and put them on a conveyor. And that's what the job is for receiving. And then the stower takes the packages off of the conveyor and puts them on a shelf somewhere and tells the computer what shelf it's on. And for outbound jobs, a picker takes the item off the shelf when somebody has ordered it, and they put it on a different conveyor heading somewhere else. And then a packer is the person who's taking the product off of that conveyor and putting it in a box and putting a label on it and sending it out. Job requirements, I think I kind of went over the physical stuff already. Bending, lifting, stooping, twisting, diploma. You do need to have like a high school diploma or equivalent GED. If you do not have one, Amazon does have a program to help you get one, which is pretty nice. I've talked to the Camper Force people about it, and they will help you get a diploma so that you could work for Amazon. Drug test is required for this. Other than that, there's no really experience necessary as long as you are physically capable of doing the work. I tell people all the time, they say, well, how do I'm going to apply to work at Amazon. How hard is it to get in? And it's really quite easy. If you apply and you meet the minimum requirements, they're pretty much going to be like, yes, we want you, and you're pretty much guaranteed in. They are going to be at the big tent, so if you guys go to the big tent, there will be an Amazon booth there, and you can speak to them about Camper Force. Locations for 2018 are all going to be in Tennessee and Kentucky. Murfreesboro, Tennessee, Campbellsville, Kentucky, Hebron, Kentucky, and Shepherdsville, Kentucky. None of them are like really hopping towns. Like when you go work for Amazon, you're not going to be like in a big mecca, and there's not going to be like a whole they're not like tourist kind of locations. Like there's not a whole lot to do there, but the reason why you're there is to work, and you're going to be working so many hours that you're probably not going to have a whole lot of time to go out and sightsee much anyway, so the location hardly even matters. I always recommend people try to get a campground as close to the job site as you can, because that makes a big difference when you're working a lot of hours to be able to commute back and forth really fast. One other thing about locations, Tennessee and Kentucky in December, they get pretty cold. I have done it with my 3-season camper, and you can, but you'll want to learn a little bit about if you have an actual RV, you'll want to like protect your water lines, like heat tape or something on your hoses, emptying your tanks if it's going to get below freezing. Normally it won't be below freezing for multiple days in a row, but especially during December, by the end of the season, by December, it will be getting below freezing pretty much every night. But there are things you can do. You can go online and you can search, camping in the cold weather, and it's fine. For those of you in vans and those sort of vehicles, absolutely you can still work at Amazon. They don't really care what kind of rig you're in. It doesn't need to be self-contained because they're going to have you put up in a campground that has, the bathrooms and everything there. You just will want to make sure that you do choose a RV park that has restrooms in it, but I'll get more to that in a bit. Hours, season length, and pay. For 2018, the sites all have slightly different, like the pay is a little bit different at everyone, and it ranges from $10.75 an hour to $11.75 an hour, depending on which site you pick. And when you apply, it's one application, and you just choose which site you are most interested in. The average workday, it's 40 hours a week during the start of the season, usually when things are getting going, and it's 10-hour shifts, so you will work 4 days on, have 3 days off, and usually that's 4 days in a row on, 3 days in a row off, but there is also a donut shift, so you might work 2 days, 1 day off, 2 days, 2 days off. There's a day shift and a night shift, and the hours kind of vary from site to site, so it's hard to say exactly what hours you would be working, but when you're applying, you can request to work the day shift or request to be on the night shift. Working the night shift, you do get a shift differential, so you make a little bit more money if you are willing to work at night. Usually it's about $1 an hour, but it also depends on where they need the most people. Like if there's a big need for people to work a certain job night shift, they might offer a higher differential to get more people to apply for that shift and for that time. You get paid every week working at Amazon. It used to be every 2 weeks, but they changed it recently to every week, so it's kind of handy. And you will be working for Amazon itself. Like this, Camper Force is a part of the main Amazon program, so it's not through a temp company. This is actually working for Amazon as a temp employee. Benefits. As a Camper Force employee, you are going to get your campsite for free. So you get a full hookup site, no charge. You will have to pay for your own propane though, so I recommend relying more on electric heaters and that sort of thing over propane heaters if you can, because it's a way to come out of it cheaper. Amazon, how this works is when you apply, Amazon has a list of campgrounds for every site, and they don't choose one for you. You pick which one you want from their list of ones that they're partnered with. So they'll kind of give you a little handout saying the name of the campground, the contact information, how far away it is from the site, and it's kind of up to you to call those different places and pick which one you want to be at and reserve your own site. They'll pay for it, but you have to call from their list of approved sites. Other benefits, if you make it through the whole season, you did get a completion bonus, and in past years it has been $1 for every hour worked as a bonus, which pretty much ends up to about 2 weeks worth of work if you work the usual 10 to 12 weeks. Most people will start in September or October and go up until just before Christmas. Reality check. Amazon's hard work. Like, it's really hard work, and a lot of people, they don't expect it. They think, they're retirees, and they're going to go in there, and they'll make some extra money, and it'll be grand. You don't go to Amazon to have fun. Like, Amazon is not a fun job to work, but it's a job where you make pretty good money, and that's the whole point of being there. So you are going to want good shoes, like good tennis shoes, and most people also buy inserts. Like, I spend $50, $60 every other year for Amazon shoes because having comfortable shoes is so important when you're going to be on your feet that much. There are quotas to meet. Now, if you're a part of the Camper Force program, your goals, your productivity goals, are going to be 85% of the normal Amazonian goals, and I have never met anybody working at Amazon who wasn't able to make that 85% goal. So not everybody can make 100%, but everybody's been able to make 85% that I've talked to Now that still isn't going to make it fun. Like at 85%, you're still going to be moving constantly. They try to wring, Amazon tries to wring everything out of you that they can. I mean, you're pretty much a number, but I've never felt that I was treated unfairly, really. I mean, I felt like I was treated more like a number than a person, but sometimes you hear these stories that come out, especially around the holidays, about how horrible the conditions are working at Amazon, and that might be the case for some fulfillment centers, for some warehouses, but not the ones in the Camper Force program, not the ones that I've worked at. So it's just been kind of my experience. Another thing to note, they're pretty strict about punch-in times. So if your shift starts at 4 p.m., you have to be in there punched in at 4 p.m. at your station. Likewise, for lunch periods, you get a half hour. You get 2 breaks, and those are 15 minutes. And you have to be like at your station at the end of those 15-minute times. So theoretically, your break is 15 minutes long, but by the time you walk to the break room, take your break, and then walk all the way back to your station, you don't really get 15 minutes. I bring this up mostly for the people who have pets, because that's a question I get quite a bit. Like, I have dogs, can I work Amazon? Will I be able to come home at lunch to take them out? And the answer is probably not, but every year there are people that come to Amazon, and it's a couple, and only one person has to work at Amazon if you're a couple. So usually, like every place I've worked at, there's been a couple where one has worked, one has not worked, and has taken care of everybody's dogs in the campground where everybody else is working in Amazon. So there's a pretty good chance that you'll be able to arrange something, to have somebody come in and look on your pets while you're working Amazon. You yourself probably will not be able to, get off of work to come look at them. There are metal detectors and security guards at the entrances and exits. If you have like a metal plate or something in your body, you will set the metal detector off. If you have like a slip, you can get through pretty quickly. They take theft pretty seriously. But you'll have to go through that hassle of going through security every time you leave the floor, and it's a hassle, and it's just not fun, but that's just the way it is. Hiring process. I already mentioned that Amazon has a presence at the Big Tent, so if you go to the Big Tent, you can sign up there, get more information. If you go to like Google or any other search engine and you type in Amazon Camper Force, the first thing that pops up is going to be the website with the online application on it, because most of the applying is done online. The application it's kind of long and kind of tedious. It takes, I think it took me like 2 hours or so to go through it, although I was pretty slow. But as I said, it's pretty easy. Like if you meet the requirements, pretty much you're going to get contacted back. Applications are already open now for 2018. They normally start hiring right away after the previous season ends. So they're already looking for people right now for 2018. If you apply early, it probably won't be until summer that they get back to you. It just takes them a while to get everything in order. They'll contact you usually sometime in the summer and set up a webinar or a phone interview depending on which site you're applying to. It kind of varies. But the phone interview and the webinar, it's not really about asking you questions to see if you're a good fit so much as making sure that you actually read the job description and you know what you're getting into. Numbers. My last year working at Camper Force, which was 2016, I worked 11 weeks and I made about $6,200. I did work as much overtime as I possibly could. In Camper Force, you are required to work 40 hours a week, but you can volunteer to work more overtime, up to 55 hours a week, and I always did that. Sometimes that overtime comes in an extra hour a day, so you're working 11-hour days instead of 10-hour days, and sometimes that comes from working an extra day a week or 2, so you could be working 5 or 6 days a week instead of just 4. But yeah, I always work as many hours as I can, and that's pretty typical. I usually bring in around $6,000 when I do it, and that's after taxes. That's after the states have taken out their share. So money is pretty good there. Next, I'll be talking about national parks. Amazon kind of covers the fall season. That kind of covers me from, September, October until December. And what I typically do during the summer for work camping is work at a national park. Now, when you're working for a national park, a lot of people think that you're going to be working for the National Park Service. And you can go on, USA Jobs, the government website, and you can apply to be like a ranger and work for the actual Park Service. But those jobs they're very highly coveted, and there aren't too many of them. Like, new positions don't open up very frequently. So most people who work at national parks actually end up working for a concessionaire that has a contract with the government to provide goods and services inside the park. So you might have heard of them. A couple of the big ones are Xanterra, Delaware North, and Aramark. And it's usually for these companies that work campers end up working for. There are national parks kind of in the northern part of the country and in the southern part of the country. So the kind of nice thing about working for national parks is that you can get summer jobs with the ones up north where their busy season is in the summer. And like Big Bend, the ones Grand Canyon, farther south, you can get jobs that cover in the winter. Pay potential is not as high working at these jobs as at Amazon. You go to Amazon to make a lot of money and you don't get a whole lot of free time. It's kind of the opposite working at a national park. You're still going to want to look for those 40-hour-a-week positions to make enough money to cover your cost of living and actually be able to save some. But you are not going to get rich working at a national park unless you're like a cook or a mechanic or have some other skill or experience beyond just the normal. Like with Amazon, you don't need to have any experience. You can come in there with nothing and you can get hired. There are definitely entry-level positions, where you don't need experience working at national parks. If you want to make more money working at national parks, you will need some sort of a skill, like be a tour bus driver or something like that if you want the higher pay. But the benefit is you get to live in a national park for summer, which is pretty cool, and I've always enjoyed it, so that's why I keep going back. These jobs, there are a couple different websites that I use to find them. The big one being coolworks.com. Again, that's coolworks.com. Because it's a bunch of different companies. There's not like one centralized location. Like all the different companies put their advertisements up on these online websites, like Coolworks. Workers on Wheels is another one. Workers on Wheels. And if you pay for Work Camper News, that's a subscription site that you have to pay to get the job listings for, but you can also find a bunch of them on there on Work Camper News. The hiring process is a little bit different because these are all different companies, but there are some things that are in common with them. Most of them, like Amazon, have a pretty extensive online application, and you apply online and they will contact you back. Might be a week or two usually is what I've found from the 3 that I've worked at. I've worked at Yellowstone National Park, Zion National Park, and Badlands National Park, all for 3 different companies. For the summer jobs, you will find a lot more summer national park jobs than you will winter ones, just because there are more national parks that are open in the summertime. Like that's when all the kids are off of school, and that's when they need the extra help. They bring in workers like RVers because a lot of these parks, especially the ones out west, are located in pretty remote areas and there just isn't a strong enough local workforce, and that's why they bring in the campers. But November, December is usually when the summer national job parks, like when they start hiring for the summer. And they will still be applying now, so January now is a good time if you're interested. You'll want to go on sooner rather than later, because the earlier you apply, the more opportunities that you will have, that there will be on there. Once jobs start filling up, the selection gets slower, and it's just nice to be able to go on pretty early on, so you have the greatest range of opportunities to choose from, depending on what kind of things you're interested in. I tended to work in gift shops as a cashier, but the restaurants also hire, gas stations hire, hotels hire, so there's a number of different places you could work, which is kind of nice. So there's a bigger range, I guess, of opportunities available out there. And as I said, if you have some specialized experience, management experience, a commercial driver's license for driving a tour bus, cooking, that kind of stuff, you can make more money. Wages and benefits. You will find jobs in national parks that are just a volunteer, where you just get your site and you don't get any money on top of that, but you only work maybe 20 hours a week. The position I'm in, and that I imagine a lot of you are in too, is you need to actually make money to survive off of this. So you are going to want to go through those websites and look for the opportunities that give you a full 40-hour work week in order to make enough money to make it worth it, so that you're making more than you're spending. Campgrounds, they'll give you a site and it'll be a discounted site, but unlike Amazon, most of the time you will not get a free site. You will still have to pay some of your wages into the site, and it varies a lot depending on where you're at. When I was at Yellowstone, it was about $60 a month. Badlands, it was quite a bit less than that, because Badlands, there aren't as many people interested in it, and you'll find that the locations that aren't as popular, where it's harder to get people in, you can usually get more money and a better deal working at those places than you can at the more popular national parks that everybody wants to go live in and work. So just something to keep in mind when you're looking at listings. One important note, a lot of national parks, the labor laws are a little different there, and they can have you work up to 46 hours without overtime. So that's something to think of. You either are going to want to work a lot more than 46 hours if you want to get all that overtime, or you're going to want to tell them, no, I don't want to work more than 40 hours, that you're not feeling like you're getting gypped out of those extra 6 hours, that you're not getting paid for overtime. Interviews, unlike Amazon, when you apply and they contact you and they set up usually a phone interview, they will ask you, they will ask you some questions, and the questions are all pretty typical across the board from these different ones. They'll ask you questions like, what experience do you have doing this job? Give me an example of a time that you saw somebody doing something that was against the rules. What did you do? How well do you work with others? That kind of stuff. It's all pretty basic questions. And they'll have a part where you can ask questions of them, and I definitely recommend asking them questions about the position if the job listing on CoolWorks isn't completely filled out. Because you'll hear stories sometimes where people thought that the job was going to be one thing, and then they arrived and it was something completely different. And a lot of that can be avoided if you just make sure you ask them questions like, what exactly am I going to be doing at this job? Like, how much does laundry cost? What's the phone signal like out there? Just stuff like that. What's your pet policy? And the more answers you can get to those kind of questions, the easier it'll be to pick the job that's going to best fit for you. Because my recommendation is, if you're going to do national parks, you're going to want to apply to a lot of them, like all about the same time. Apply to a whole bunch of them, see who contacts you back, go through the interview process, ask your questions, and then once you have offers, go through those offers and pick the best offer before saying yes. Don't just say yes to the first one you get. And that's how you kind of work the system and make the most money and get a job that you enjoy doing the most. So that's kind of been my experience there. Okay, and last but not least of the jobs I'm going to talk about is the beet harvest. Yay. You see this look on my face? No, this past fall, I worked the beet harvest for the very first time instead of doing Amazon. You can do Amazon and the beet harvest at the same time, because the beet harvest normally happens at the beginning of October and runs like 3 or 4 weeks. And Amazon, they still have people starting in November. So if you want to make the most amount of money, what you do is you work the beet harvest for 2-3 weeks until it's done, and then you go to Amazon and work all the overtime at Amazon. So if money is like your biggest thing, that's kind of the way to do it. What it is, there are a couple different beet harvest companies. The one that I worked for was American Crystal Sugar Company, and they hire RVers to come in. You're working a harvest. It's quite a bit different work from either working Amazon or working at a national park, because you're going to be outside working with a beet piling machine, and like Amazon, it's very hard work. You'll work 12-hour days at the beet harvest. That's right. They have a day shift and a night shift. You start 7 a.m., 7 p.m., or 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Um, it's not a very long season. Usually it's 10 to 14 days, but you don't get a day off as long as the weather's good. If it gets too warm, they can't harvest beets because the beets could rot. If it's too cold, they freeze in the ground and they can't get them up. But if the weather's good, you'll work all the way through, and that's what it was this year. It was a record season. I worked 15 days in a row, like 12-hour days. That was tough. Like, it was really tough. I got a little video up on my blog about that. Job descriptions. There are 3 or 4 different positions that work campers could work in. All of them revolve around the beet piler, and it's hard to explain what a beet piler is for somebody who's not familiar with agricultural work. It's this big, huge machine, and you can go on YouTube and you can search beet piler and you can see what it is, and this will make a whole lot more sense rather than me trying to explain it to you. But you could be a piler operator, and usually piler operators, they recommend that you've been there at least one season working some other position before or have previous agricultural experience. But that's the person that sits in the house and moves all the levers for the machine, because semis are coming in with the beets. They get to the beet piling station. They drop the beets off at this machine by unloading the back of their semi. The machine kind of sorts the dirt from the beets, spits the beets out onto the pile on the back, and then the semi picks up their dirt and they go. So there's a piler operator who's moving all the levers to move the chutes when the beets get piled on to start the conveyor and stop the conveyor. There is a boom operator, and the boom operator is standing at the other end of the machine, swinging the boom back and forth so that the beets get piled on the pile in evenly without getting stuck. And then there are 2 helpers, and that's what most people start out as. That's what I did most of the time. Helper / sample taker. And what you're doing is you're helping the semis get into position on the beet piler to drop off the beets. And then you're telling them to go pick up their dirt at the end. And you might also be taking samples, because the farmers get paid based on the sugar content of their beets. So samples need to be taken to see what the sugar quality is, and you might be helping use the bag and getting samples up there. Job requirements. They did not require a diploma. They did not require a drug test. It was pretty easy getting in. They still had an online application that you fill out from the website. And that website is sugarbeetharvest.com. Where it's located. I believe there's more than one company that does it, but the company that I work for, they're mostly located in the Red River Valley. That's kind of on the border between Minnesota and North Dakota. So it is very far up north, and this being usually starting October 1st is when the season starts. But again, it depends on the weather. It'll be cold up there. It could get below freezing. It could snow in October. Normally people are out of there before the end of October. Normally, but it depends on the weather. You work straight through until the harvest is complete, weather permitting. And they will assign you a RV site. Unlike Amazon, you don't get to pick which one you're at. They'll tell you, okay, you're going to be here, and this is the campground you're going to be at. It sounds like all the campgrounds that they're partnered with are full-service campgrounds. There were van dwellers working the beet harvest with me. They had showers and restrooms there on the site. All the sites are a little bit different. Like I worked for this company. I worked in Grafton, North Dakota, which I'm sure none of you have ever heard of, because Grafton's like tiny, tiny, tiny town. And I made $13.25 an hour was my base wage. Yeah, and you get time and a half on everything over 40 hours. You get time and a half on Saturday. At my site, you got double time on Sunday, so that was pretty good. And then there's also a bonus that you get for completing the season. Yes, 5% of your gross wages as a bonus. Now, I didn't get that bonus until the end of the year. So unlike Amazon, you get your bonus with your last paycheck pretty much when you leave. Here at the beet harvest, I got my bonus like at the very end of December, long after I'd left. That's just how it works. So you don't get all of your wages all at once. I made, working my 15 days, I made like $2,900, which for 15 days of work was pretty good. It was very hard work though. You're on your feet the whole time. they provide protection equipment. You're going to get super dirty, but they give you like goggles, and you have a little helmet that you have to wear. You do have to provide your own boots, and you will want like a pair of waterproof good boots. They recommend not steel toe, but you can use steel toe. You also want a good pair of gloves. It's going to get pretty cold. This was like the one job I don't think I'll go back and do because it was just so hard. But again, that's me. I worked with somebody there who was like, yeah, this is fantastic. I'm totally coming back next year. But normally, you can request days or nights. But whichever one you're working your first year there, the year you come back, you'll be working the other. So if you're working days, you'll be working nights if you come back. If you start nights, you'll be working days. But if you're a returner, you get 10% of your gross wages as a bonus. So the bonus does keep going up if you come back. You can probably, it sounded like, come back. Like I was days, and if I came back and I'm like, I want to be days again, and they might let you back, but then you're going to be getting the 5% instead of the 10% as a returner. This one, originally, American Crystal Sugar Company, they did want to hire just couples, but they couldn't find enough couples, so I had applied like in July, and in August they got back to me and they're like, well, do you want to work the beet harvest? We have positions. They couldn't get enough couples. So me and several other singles got in, but you might not, like if you're a single and you're applying, it'll probably be like you probably won't hear back from them until later on if they can't find enough couples to work to get 2 people per site on this job. But I managed to get in, so I don't know. It seems like they have trouble getting enough people to come in, so if you're single, you still got a pretty good chance.
We covered this in pretty good detail, haven't we? Yeah. Beet harvest. Let's go ahead and move on. Did you have anything else?
No, I'm good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What are your jobs? If you're applying, what job description are you applying for?
Toilets, money collection, although almost universally now they're on reservations and you never touch a penny. None of mine were on reservations because they were just too remote, and there was no internet, and there was no way. There's a lot of communication involved in reservations, and they couldn't do it with me. So I handled all the money. I accounted for every penny and had to turn it in every day, every week. You clean all the toilets. You clean the fire pits. The fire pits are a big deal. That fire pit's way too full. I would empty out the ashes. If somebody left a burning fire, I'd pour water on it, wait for it to cool, then I would empty out the ashes. You pick up the trash around the site. Those parts of the job are not difficult at all. The toilets are the only unpleasant part of the job. Do you have to do firefighting? No, you're not expected to be a firefighter. You are expected on nearly all National Forest Service rules revolve around preventing fire. And you are the enforcer of the rules. If someone leaves a hot fire in middle of the day and they go and run off to fish, I've had a lot of fishing sites, you go in and you dump it out. That's a lot of your job is prevention. One of the very first things they'll talk to you about during orientation is evacuation. They'll talk to you about evacuation routes and what to do. The Forest Service is going to come in. If there's a fire, the Forest Service is coming in and taking charge. You're not going to be, you don't have to be they'll come in and say, we're moving everyone out, and they'll move you out with them. I've had friends that actually had that happen to them in Colorado, yeah. I never had that happen to me, but we had fires in the vicinity. We were aware of them and tuned into them.
All right, so my concern with the remote, I'm in a van, we're a smaller operation, so going to get groceries, how remote are we talking? Is it like a couple hours to the closest town?
I was, from any kind of a grocery store, I was 20 miles. And it's now miles are counted differently in the mountains, in the Sierras or the Rockies. Miles are mostly counted in elevation gain and loss and curves. So I might have been the nearest big town was Fresno, and it was only 60 miles away. But the better part of understanding that is it was 7,000 feet and 10,000 curves away. And so a trip to Fresno wasn't an hour because it was 60 miles. It was 2 or 3 hours. I had a friend who was 40 miles deep, one of the High Sierras campgrounds, 20 miles to the nearest anything, and then 20 miles to the nearest town that had anything. So yeah, you can, I was 6 miles to the main campground, 20 miles to a little town called Shaver Lake. It had a hardware store, it had a gas station. Gas is really expensive up in the mountains. I was in California. where it's really expensive. One summer we were paying $5 a gallon in this little town, this little Colorado mountain town. The nearest town, nearest town with a even possibly reasonably priced grocery store was another 15, 20 miles down the mountain. What are your hours? What do you work? It's very inflexible. They're paying you 8 hours. They're not going to pay you any overtime. They're going to pay you 8 hours. So in the morning you'd get up, you'd do patrol, you'd make sure, find people who haven't paid, you'd look at make sure everyone's paid, collect if they haven't. You'll take a quick look at the toilets, you'll make sure they have toilet paper, they're not horrible, and probably one or two will be horrible, and then you'll clean them, and then you might not do a thing for another couple hours, and you'll do another patrol and see who's there, and you may not do another thing for another couple, 3-4 hours until the evening, and then people will be coming in, you'll collect again, you'll check your toilets again. So really, you know, for the most part, I had, because I had really distant remote campgrounds, I had one 12-hour day, which was just very, very long. And my weekends were busy the entire day, and then I would have Monday and Tuesday off. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday were just killers. I was just busy going all the time. Not killers, because it was pleasant work. I didn't mind the work. But then next Thursday, I might not do a thing. I might have 2 or 3 people in my campground. I took Monday, Tuesday off. Wednesday, I might come back. There'd be 1 or 2 people. Someone else cleaned the toilets while I was gone, and it'd be a really easy day. Maybe I'd only work a couple, 3-4 hours that day. So it's not it's not a structured. You can't go thinking this is going to be a structured job. It's not. So it's a great job. I do recommend it. The one thing that is very, very hard about the job is the first 2 weeks when you get there, nature reclaims its own. It is so good at that. Things grow, the bushes grow in, the needles fall from the trees, the leaves fall from the trees in the mountains, and I was always in the mountains. Snow melt would bring mud down over the roads. We'd spend the first 2 weeks shoveling mud and raking leaves and raking needles and blowing with blowers, and the first 2 weeks were 8 hours of work every day, hard work. And then after that it fell into a pretty nice routine. So the first opening the campgrounds, and usually what happens is you all go and open this campground, get it ready for customers. You'll go to the next one and you'll clean that one, and you'll just, as a group, we work as a group all around the whole area. And that's hard work. It really was hard work. A lot of people didn't make it past that because it was just hard work. You know what a great job would be for us is school bus driving. You get to be a school bus driver. I was a school bus driver for 5 years. This was long ago when you didn't have to even have a CDL. The state was in Alaska. Alaska had a special school bus driver's license that you got, and the company pretty much got it for you. And I really enjoyed the job. I didn't ever have a problem with kids. One time in my entire 5 years, I had problems with the kids, and I said, you guys either knock that off, we turn around and go back to school. And if they didn't knock it off, we turned around and went back to school. And that was the only problem I ever had. And that was solved. Right? They got off. I asked the principal to come out and the authorities to come out and deal with it, and they did it, and we went home. That was the only problem I had in 5 years. It's really an excellent job. I really enjoyed that job. It's usually pretty good pay. It's usually part-time. But here's the great thing. It's in the winter. You can work in the winter and take the summers to play, or work as a campground host in the summer. So you could go over here to Blythe. Blythe's a big enough town that they have school bus hiring all the time. They really need school bus drivers. Everywhere you go, you'll see in the fall school bus driver for hire signs. So you get over on the LTVA, you pay $180 for a year. You've got cheap living just outside of town. You drive into town to drive your school bus. What are you doing in the school bus? You're driving around. What do we like doing? We like driving around. You'll get that. Now I do believe it actually takes a CDL. It's a federal deal now. And then that translates to working in the summer. So now they've gotten you your CDL. You're working 20, 30 hours a week. In the summer, to me it's ideal. I mean, we're spending our winters here in this area. Why not go work 20, 30 hours a week and make $10, $12, $13 an hour? And that's what they're paying. They have to, because they can't get people to be school bus drivers. It's part-time. That's part of it. It's a great job, and I would really consider it. Go down to Yuma. You can get an LTVA outside Yuma. Yuma's 90,000. They must hire all kinds of school bus drivers. Yuma's a big town. Algodones is right there. That'd be a great job. I would really encourage you to consider it. If you need a job, there's a great winter job when you're just kind of killing time in the desert anyway. And the other one is poker dealer. I've talked about that. And now I'm not talking about being in a casino because that's a whole different ball game. There's tournaments all over the country. There are tournaments. These are professionals. No one gets into a tournament without being a professional. These aren't a bunch of drunks sitting around smoking and drinking and harassing you. These are professionals. And if there are troubles, they're not allowed anymore. So there aren't troubles. And there's a pit boss there, and you're treated well, and they're never going to have a problem with it as a poker dealer. There are poker dealer schools. You can go to school. You'll get in. Once you've got in, once you've been to the school, you pass. Word gets around. You'll get your first job. Once you're into all of them, and they're all over the country. And where are they? In warm places where we want to go in the winter. So I have a friend, the friend who turned me onto this. He says he averages $35 an hour. He goes to Florida. Lots of tournaments in poker. Why? Because there's a lot of old retired people there who play poker. And so he goes to tournaments there, and they're all over the Southeast. They're big in Southern California. They're big in Nevada. Obviously, they're big in Nevada. We've all heard of the World Series of Poker. I mean, that is a big thing. When my friend got into it, World Series of Poker, the big daddy of the thing, actually put on its own class. You went through the class, then you worked at the World Series of Poker, and then you were in. And so it's a traveling circuit. So when the big poker tournament comes into town, there aren't enough dealers. So they have to pay really well because they can't get enough. They got to hire, all of a sudden, for this tournament, they've got to hire another 200 dealers. Well, there aren't 200 dealers in this town. So there is a circuit that people who travel with the poker dealer. $35 an hour. You're not out in the cold, in the mud. You're not at 12 hours a day, 10 hours a day on your feet. You're sitting dealing poker. They have mandatory breaks where you get to stand and stretch and move around. You're treated really well. They need you, and that's always a good place to be, where your boss needs you. It's a really good job, and I tell everyone about it, and I don't know if I've ever known anyone that actually went ahead and did it. So go do it and tell me about it. So there's 3 other jobs I know of, and that's all I'm going to talk about. I'm done.